Dr. Ray had always believed in being ready for emergencies. As the chief medical officer of New Busan Colony, she kept supplies in every major building. She ran drills. She made sure everyone knew where the emergency shelters were, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The first energy beam hit the northern continent at exactly 14:32 local time. Ray was in the hospital when the ground shook. The lights went out for a moment, then the backup power kicked in. Her staff looked at her with frightened eyes. "Everyone stay calm," she said, even though her own heart was beating fast. This might be an earthquake. But when the second beam hit and then the third, she knew it wasn't an earthquake. She ran to the window and looked up at the sky. The Victari ships were there, black shapes against the stars, and they were firing down at her world. "All staff, Emergency Protocol 7, she announced over the hospital's communication system. "Move all patients to the underground levels now." Emergency Protocol 7 was for orbital bombardment. Ray had written it herself, but she never thought she would need to use it. The Terran doctrine protected them. No one was supposed to attack civilian colonies. The hospital had underground levels that went deep into the rock. They were designed to protect people from radiation and energy weapons. Ray's team worked fast, moving patients on stretcher beds and in wheelchairs. The sickest people went first. "Doctor, what's happening?" asked one of her nurses, a young woman named Young. "The Victari are attacking us," Ray said. There was no point in lying. "We need to get everyone underground." Outside, the bombardment was getting worse. Each energy beam that hit the planet made the building shake. Through the windows, Ray could see fires starting in the distance. The sky was turning red. Across the city, Teacher Bin was dealing with his own crisis. He had been in the middle of a history lesson when the attack started. His students were between 8 and 12 years old. They were scared and some of them were crying. "Everyone sit on the floor," Bin said in his calmest voice. "Remember what we practiced in our emergency drills." His classroom was on the 3rd floor of the school. He knew he needed to get his students to the basement shelter, but first he had to keep them from panicking. "Mr. Bin, are we going to die?" asked a little girl named Sue. Bin knelt down next to her. "No, Sue, we're going to be safe. But we need to go downstairs now, okay? Just like we practiced." He led his 23 students down the stairs. Other teachers were doing the same thing. The school's basement had been built to hold everyone, students and staff. There was food and water stored there, enough for several days. As they walked down the stairs, another energy beam hit somewhere close. The whole building shook and some of the younger children screamed. Bin started singing a song they all knew, something about butterflies and flowers. The children joined in. Their voices were shaky, but it helped them stay calm. On Captain Juan's ship, Communications Officer Jay was doing the most important job of her life. She was recording everything. Every energy beam that hit New Busan, every explosion, every moment of the planet's death. "Are you getting all of this?" Juan asked. "Yes, sir. Full spectrum recording. Audio, video, sensor data, everything." Jay's hands were steady as she worked, but inside she was screaming. She was watching 3 million people die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. All she could do was make sure the galaxy would know what happened here. The evacuation ships were trying to lift off from New Busan's spaceports. Small craft, most of them designed to carry cargo, not people. They were packed with families who had managed to reach them in time. "Sir, the Victari fighters are moving to intercept the evacuation ships," reported Weapons Officer Wook. Juan watched on his screens as the insect-like fighter craft swooped down like hunting birds. They opened fire on the defenseless evacuation ships. Some of the ships exploded immediately. Others were damaged and started falling back toward the planet. "They're hunting refugees," Juan said. His voice was very quiet, but everyone on the bridge could hear the anger in it. This wasn't war. This was murder. Back on Earth, President Su was in an emergency meeting when Admiral Kyung burst into the room. He didn't wait to be announced. He didn't apologize for the interruption. He just walked straight to the president's desk and put down a datapad. "Ma'am, you need to see this right now." President Su was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but everyone in the room went quiet when she spoke. She had been president for 8 years and she was known for being calm under pressure. But when she watched the recordings from New Busan, her face went white. "They're actually doing it," she whispered. "They're breaking the doctrine." "Yes, ma'am. As of 30 minutes ago, New Busan is gone. 3 million civilians dead." Sue stood up from her chair. Around the conference table, her advisors waited to see what she would do. Some of them were already talking about diplomatic protests and economic sanctions. They were thinking like politicians. But President Sue wasn't thinking like a politician anymore. She was thinking like a human being who had just watched her people get murdered. "Admiral, I want you to activate the Omega Protocols." Everyone in the room went very still. The Omega Protocols hadn't been used since they were written. They were the plans for what to do if someone broke the Terran doctrine. "Ma'am," said her chief advisor, a man named Park, "maybe we should consider other options first. Diplomatic pressure, economic..." And Sue's voice was like ice. "They didn't attack our military. They didn't target our ships or our bases. They murdered civilians, children, families, 3 million innocent people." She looked around the room at her advisors. Some of them looked scared. Good, she thought. They should be scared. "The Terran doctrine isn't just a law," she continued. "It's the one thing we gave to the galaxy. The one principle we asked everyone to follow, and now the Vectari have broken it." Admiral Kyung nodded. "What are your orders, ma'am?" "Contact every human military commander in the galaxy. Tell them the doctrine has been violated. Tell them the Omega Protocols are now active." "And the Galactic Council?" Sue was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the times she had sat in council meetings, listening to alien politicians make speeches about peace and cooperation. Where were they now? Where was their condemnation of this atrocity? "Send them the recordings," she said finally. "Let them see what their diplomatic solutions have led to." On the far side of the galaxy, the Vectari War Prime Shex was feeling very pleased with himself. He stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the reports from New Busan. The human colony was completely destroyed. No survivors, no witnesses except for the few thousand refugees who had escaped, and what could they do? Shex was tall even for a Vectari, almost 8 feet with a hard shell that gleamed under the ship's lights. His forearms moved constantly as he worked, checking reports and giving orders. His species had been at war with someone for most of their history. "It's what they did best. The human patrol ship escaped," reported one of his officers. "Let it go," Shex said. "Let them run back to Earth and tell their leaders what happened here. It will make the negotiations easier." Shex believed he had won a great victory. The humans had been expanding into territory the Vectari wanted. Now they would be too frightened to continue. They would negotiate. They would give up their claims to several star systems. Everyone would get what they wanted except for the 3 million humans who were now dead. But they didn't matter. The Vectari had studied human history. They knew humans fought wars, but they also knew humans eventually made peace. They traded. They compromised. They were reasonable. What the Vectari didn't understand was that there was a difference between attacking human soldiers and attacking human civilians. They had never read the human philosophers who wrote about just war. They had never studied the human concept of righteous anger. They were about to learn. Back on Earth, General Dan was in his underground command center, 3 miles beneath the surface. He was reading reports from across human space. The Omega Protocols were working exactly as designed. Hidden military bases that had been secret for decades were coming online. Shipyards that the galaxy didn't know existed were starting production. Weapons that had never been tested in combat were being loaded onto ships. Humanity had always planned for this day. The day someone would break their sacred law. "Sir," said his aide, Lieutenant Ko, "we're getting responses from all sectors. Operation Vengeance is ready to begin." Dan nodded. Operation Vengeance was the military response to a violation of the Terran doctrine. It had been planned for 50 years, refined and updated but never used. Now it would be. "What's our total force strength?" "Sir, we have 237 ships ready for immediate deployment. Another 400 will be ready within the week." Dan smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "And the special weapons?" "All systems are operational, sir. The special weapons were humanity's secret shame. They were designed to do one thing: destroy entire species. Not just their military, not just their governments, but their entire civilization. The weapons had been built in case humanity ever faced extinction. Now they would be used for something else." Justice. President Sue's message went out to every human world at the same time. It was simple and direct. Captain Juan pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of his ship's bridge. Through the large window he could see New Busan floating in space like a green and blue jewel. The planet looked peaceful from up here. 3 million people lived down there, most of them farmers and their families. They grew food that fed dozens of worlds across human space. His ship, the Soul's Pride, was not very big. It had enough weapons to fight off pirates, but not much more. Juan had been patrolling this area for 2 years now. It was quiet work, mostly boring. The worst things he usually saw were smugglers trying to avoid taxes. "Sir, we're getting a message from the research station," said his communications officer. Jay, she was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and quick hands on the controls. "Put it through," Juan said. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Nari, the head scientist on the orbital station above New Busan. She sounded worried. "Captain Juan, we're seeing some strange readings on our long-range sensors. Big energy signatures moving this way." Juan frowned. "How big? And how many?" "At least 12 ships, sir. Maybe more. They're still too far away to get a clear count, but they're moving fast. Really fast." Juan felt his stomach drop. 12 ships was way more than his little patrol could handle. "Any idea who they belong to?" There was a pause. Then Nari's voice came back and she sounded scared. "Sir, I think they're Vecthari." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew about the Vecthari. They looked like giant insects with hard shells and too many arms. They were strong fighters and they didn't like humans very much. There had been some problems with them over territory, but nothing serious. Both sides had always followed the rules. "How long until they get here?" Juan asked. "At their current speed, maybe 6 hours." Juan turned to his weapons officer, a big man named Wook. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority 1. While Wook worked on the connection, Juan thought about the law. It was the only law that humans had ever made the whole galaxy accept. Every species that joined the Galactic Council had to agree to it. The law was simple. No one could attack civilian colonies ever. It didn't matter if you were at war. It didn't matter if you were angry. Civilian colonies were off limits. Humans had pushed for this law 50 years ago when they first joined the Council. They had seen too many wars where innocent people died, just because they lived on the wrong planet. Admiral Kyung, who was just a young officer back then, had helped write the law. Now he was the head of Earth's military. "Connection established, sir," Wook said. Admiral Kyung's face appeared on the main screen. He was an old man now, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. But his voice was still strong. "Captain Juan, what's your situation?" "Sir, we have Vecthari ships approaching New Busan. At least 12, possibly more. They'll be here in 6 hours. Kyung's face went very still. "Are you sure they're Vecthari?" "The research station confirmed it, sir." "Captain, I need you to listen carefully. Try to contact the Vecthari fleet. Remind them about the Terran doctrine. New Busan is a civilian colony. They can't touch it." "Yes, sir." "What if they don't listen?" Kyung was quiet for a long moment. "Then document everything. Record every second. The galaxy needs to know if someone breaks our law." The connection ended. Juan looked around his bridge. His crew was small, only 15 people, but they were good. They had trained together for years. Jay was already trying to contact the Vecthari ships. Wook was checking their weapons, even though everyone knew they wouldn't be enough. "Sir," Jay said, "I'm not getting any response from the Vecthari. They're not answering. Keep trying." On New Busan, people were starting their day. Dr. Ray was probably at the hospital, getting ready for her morning rounds. Teacher Bin would be preparing lessons for his students. They had no idea what was coming. The hours passed slowly. Juan's ship moved closer to New Busan, but stayed far enough away to run if needed. The research station kept sending updates. The Vecthari fleet was getting bigger. More ships were joining it. "Captain," Nari's voice came through the speakers again. "We're reading at least 20 ships now. And sir, some of them are really big. Battle cruisers. Battle cruisers. Those were ships designed to destroy other ships or to attack planets. They had no business near a farming colony." "Still no response to our messages?" Juan asked. "Nothing, sir. It's like they can't hear us, but Juan knew they could hear. The Vecthari just didn't want to talk." 2 hours before the fleet arrived, something changed. The research station's instruments picked up new readings. The Vecthari ships were charging their weapons, Captain. Nari's voice was shaking now. "They're powering up their orbital bombardment systems." Juan felt cold. Orbital bombardment was used to attack planets. There was only one reason to use it on New Busan. "Get me Admiral Kyung again," he ordered. This time, Kyung answered immediately. "Report, Captain." "Sir, the Vecthari are charging bombardment weapons. I think they're going to attack the colony." Kyung's face went white. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes, sir." The research station confirmed it. Captain, you need to evacuate as many people as you can. Your ship can carry maybe 200 refugees. It's not much, but it's something. What about the rest of them? Kyung closed his eyes. Do what you can, son. And record everything. Juan ordered his ship down to the planet's surface. They landed at the main spaceport near the capital city. People were already starting to panic. Word was spreading that alien ships were coming. Dr. Ray was there, helping to organize the evacuation. She was a small woman, but she had a strong voice. Children and elderly first, she shouted. Everyone stay calm. Juan's crew worked fast. They loaded families onto the ship as quickly as they could. A young teacher named Bin brought a group of school children. Their eyes were wide with fear, but Bin kept them calm with jokes and songs. How many can we take? Juan asked Wook. Maybe 250 if we pack them in tight. 250 out of 3 million. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. The Vekthari fleet arrived just as Juan's ship lifted off. 23 ships, all of them armed for war. They took positions around New Busan like they were surrounding prey. Captain, Jay said, her voice very quiet. They're targeting the surface. Juan opened a channel to all frequencies. This is Captain Juan of the Earth Defense Fleet. Vekthari ships, you are in violation of the Terran Doctrine. New Busan is a civilian colony. You must withdraw immediately. There was no answer. Vekthari fleet, please respond. There are 3 million innocent people on that planet, children, families. They are not soldiers, still nothing. Then, the bombardment began. The first energy beam lit up the night, side of New Busan like a new sun. It struck the northern continent where the biggest farms were. Then another beam and another. The planet's surface started to glow. They're actually doing it, Wook whispered. They're breaking the law. Juan watched in horror as more beams struck the planet. Cities were disappearing. Farms were turning to ash. The research station, which had been orbiting safely above the planet, suddenly exploded. The Vekthari had destroyed it too. Jay, are you recording this? Every second, sir. Good, the galaxy needs to see this. On his ship's sensors, Juan could see the evacuation ships that had managed to lift off from New Busan, maybe 20 small craft carrying a few thousand people. The Vekthari fighters moved in to attack them. Sir, they're hunting the refugees, Jay said. Juan's hands made fists. The Vekthari weren't just breaking the law. They were being cruel about it. They were killing people who were trying to run away. His ship was too small to fight the fighters, but he could try to save some of the evacuation craft. Take us in, he ordered. They managed to rescue 3 small ships before the fighters drove them off. In total, maybe 5,000 people escaped New Busan. Out of 3 million, the bombardment went on for hours. When it was over, New Busan was dead. The oceans were boiling. The continents were black and burning. Nothing could live there anymore. Juan sent his report to Earth Command. Along with it, he sent the recordings Jay had made. The galaxy would see what the Vekthari had done. They would know that someone had finally broken humanity's sacred law. He didn't know it yet, but those recordings would change everything. The Vekthari thought they had won a victory. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Admiral Juan stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Revenge and watched the Vekthari colony world of Keth Prime grow larger on the main screen. The planet looked peaceful from space with blue oceans and green continents. About 50 million Vekthari lived there, most of them farmers and factory workers. It reminded him of New Busan. Admiral, said his weapons officer, Commander Lee, all systems are ready. We can begin bombardment on your order. One looked at the planet for a long moment. 50 million civilians. If he gave the order, they would all die, just like the humans on New Busan had died. It would be justice. It would be revenge, but it wouldn't be right. Belay that order, Commander. We're not here to murder civilians. Lee looked confused. Sir, our orders were to respond to the violation of the Terran Doctrine. We will respond. But we will not become like them. One opened a communication channel to the planet below. This is Admiral One of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here because your government attacked and destroyed New Busan colony, killing 3 million innocent civilians. You have 1 hour to evacuate all non-military personnel from your cities. The response came quickly from the planet's surface, a Vekthari voice speaking in broken human language. Admiral Juan, this is Governor Keth. Please, we are civilians here. We did not attack your colony. I know, Juan said. That's why I'm giving you time to evacuate. 1 hour. What one didn't tell the governor was that this evacuation was being broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. Humans were watching to see if their military would target civilians. Aliens were watching to see what humanity would do when they had the chance for revenge. On Earth, President Sue was watching the broadcast from her office. Her advisors were with her, including General Dan and Admiral Kyung. "Sir," said her communications director, "we're getting messages from the Galactic Council. They want to negotiate." "What do they want to negotiate?" So asked. "They're offering to censure the Vecthari, remove them from the Council for 10 years, make them pay compensation." Sue laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Censure them? Remove them for 10 years? They murdered 3 million people." "Ma'am," said General Dan, "the Council is scared. They've never seen us mobilize like this before. They don't know what we're capable of." "Good," Sue said. "Let them be scared. Fear is the only thing that will make them take the doctrine seriously." On the screen, they watched as Admiral Wan's fleet began its attack on Keth Prime. But instead of targeting the cities where civilians lived, the Earthships hit military bases, government buildings, and industrial centers. The bombardment was precise, surgical, deadly, but not indiscriminate. "He's showing them the difference," Admiral Kyung said quietly, "between war and murder." In space near Keth Prime, Captain Yu was commanding the stealth destroyer Ghost of Soul. Her ship was invisible to Vecthari sensors, using technology the aliens didn't know humans possessed. She was hunting. "Captain," said her sensor officer, Lieutenant Rim, "I've got a Vecthari supply convoy 3 light hours from here, 12 ships heading for their border worlds." "Military supplies?" "Looks like it, sir. Weapons, ammunition, spare parts for warships." Yu smiled. "Set an intercept course. It's time to cut off their supply lines." The Vecthari convoy never saw them coming. Ghost of Soul appeared out of nowhere, weapons firing. The supply ships weren't armed for combat. They surrendered quickly. "Board them," Yu ordered. "Capture the crews." "I want them to see something." Lieutenant Rim led the boarding party onto the largest supply ship. The Vecthari crew was terrified. They had heard stories about humans, but most of them had never seen one before. "You," Rim said, pointing to the ship's captain, a Vecthari with scars on his shell, "you're going to watch a recording." The recording was from New Busan. It showed the colony burning. It showed the evacuation ships being hunted down. It showed 3 million people dying. "This is what your government did," Rim said. "This is why we're here." The Vecthari captain watched the recording without speaking. When it was over, he looked up at Rim. "I did not know," he said in broken human language. "We were not told." "Now you know," Rim said. "Tell your people what you saw here." Then the human boarding party left, taking the supplies with them. The Vecthari crew was left alive, but stranded. They would have to call for rescue, and when they did, they would have to explain what happened. Word would spread. Back on Earth, Intelligence Director Han was in his office, surrounded by screens and data displays. He was tracking something the public didn't know about yet. The conspiracy. "Sir," said his deputy, Agent Yu, "we've confirmed it. The Zorvani provided intelligence to the Vecthari. Detailed maps of New Busan's defenses." "What about the Kelrathi?" "They supplied the heavy bombardment weapons, the ones used to glass the planet." Han nodded. He had suspected this from the beginning. The attack on New Busan had been too well planned, too coordinated. "The Vecthari had help? How many species are we looking at?" "At least 7, sir. Maybe more." The Zorvani and Kelrathi were the main suppliers, but others provided logistical support, safe harbor for Vecthari ships, communication relays, even some financial backing. "Get me everything," Han said. "Names, dates, transaction records. I want to know exactly who helped murder 3 million humans." "Yes, sir. What do we do with the information?" Han was quiet for a moment. "We make them pay." In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Bay sat at the human delegation's table and listened to the emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species were making speeches about the need for peace, for negotiation, for restraint. Chancellor Thek, the bird-like Altarian who led the council, was speaking now. "The human response has been disproportionate," he said. "Yes, the attack on New Busan was regrettable, but..." "Regrettable?" Bay stood up, interrupting the Chancellor. In 50 years of council membership, no human representative had ever interrupted a session. 3 million civilians are dead, and you call it regrettable? "Ambassador Bay," Chancellor Thek said, "please observe proper protocol." "Protocol?" Bay laughed. You want to talk about protocol? The Terran doctrine is protocol. It's been galactic law for 50 years. Every species in this chamber agreed to it. Bay looked around the room at the assembled alien representatives. Most of them wouldn't meet her eyes. For 50 years, the doctrine has kept the peace. It has protected civilians of every species. Your civilians. And now that it's been broken, you want to negotiate? She activated a holographic display above the council chamber. It showed the recordings from New Busan, the planet burning, the evacuation ships being destroyed, children dying. This is what negotiation gets you, Bay said. This is what happens when you don't enforce your own laws. Several alien representatives looked away from the images. Others made sounds of distress, but some, Bay noticed, showed no reaction at all. Those were the ones Intelligence Director Han was investigating. The human response will continue, Bay said, until justice is served. Not just against the Vekthari, but against every species that helped them. Every government that supported them. Every individual who gave them aid. She sat down. The chamber was completely quiet. On the Vekthari homeworld, War Prime Shex was beginning to understand that his victory at New Busan might not have been as complete as he thought. The humans weren't negotiating. They weren't backing down. They were attacking Vekthari colonies across space. But they weren't killing civilians. That confused him. Why don't they just destroy our colonies? He asked his intelligence officer, a smaller Vekthari named Grix. They have the firepower. I don't understand it either, War Prime. They could end this quickly if they targeted our civilian populations. Shex thought about this. In Vekthari culture, if someone attacked your people, you attacked theirs. It was simple. It was logical. But the humans weren't following that logic. Send a message to their fleet commanders, Shex said. Tell them we're willing to negotiate. What terms should I offer? Standard war reparations. Maybe some territorial concessions. Nothing major. Grix looked uncertain. War Prime, I don't think they want to negotiate. Everyone wants to negotiate eventually. It's just a matter of finding the right price. But Shex was wrong. The humans had already decided on their price, and it was higher than he could imagine. On a secret military base hidden in an asteroid field, Engineer Sam was putting the finishing touches on humanity's most terrible weapon. It wasn't a bomb or a missile. It was something much worse. The planet Cracker is ready for deployment, Sam reported to his supervisor, Colonel Park. How many can we build? We have materials for 6 right now. Maybe a dozen more within the month. Colonel Park nodded. The planet Crackers weren't designed to destroy worlds. They were designed to make them uninhabitable. A single device could poison a planet's atmosphere, kill all plant life, and make the surface toxic for thousands of years. They were weapons of genocide. Sir, Sam said quietly, are we really going to use these? Park was quiet for a long moment. I hope not, Sam, I really hope not. But if the aliens think they can murder our civilians and get away with it, they need to know what we're capable of. What if they surrender? Then we won't need them. But if they don't? Park left the sentence unfinished. Back on the bridge of the Revenge, Admiral Wan was receiving new orders from Earth Command. The Vekthari homeworld burned, but not from energy weapons. Admiral Park's fleet had surrounded the system and cut off all supply lines. No food ships came in. No medical supplies. No fuel for their cities. The planet was slowly starving. Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, and watched the long-range sensors. 12 Vekthari defense fleets had tried to break through his blockade. All of them were now drifting metal in space. Admiral, said his communications officer, Commander. Oh, we're receiving another surrender offer from the surface. What are they offering this time? Complete withdrawal from human space, war reparations, the arrest of War Prime Shex. Park had received similar offers every day for the past 2 months. Each one was more desperate than the last. The Vekthari were learning what it meant to fight humans when humans were truly angry. Send the same response as always, Park said. Unconditional surrender. Submit to human justice. Accept human terms. Nothing less. Sir, they're also asking about their civilian population. Food supplies are running low. Park thought about this. The blockade was working exactly as planned. The Vekthari military was cut off from supplies, but so were the civilians. Millions of innocent Vekthari were going hungry because of their government's decisions. Open a humanitarian corridor, he said. Food and medical supplies only. But every ship gets searched. No weapons, no military equipment, no communications gear. Yes, sir. It was a small mercy, but an important one. Humans didn't make war on civilians, even alien civilians, even when those aliens' government had murdered 3 million human civilians. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Yu was hunting different prey. Her target was a Zorvani intelligence base hidden in an asteroid field. The Zorvani had provided the information that made the New Busan attack possible. Now they would pay for it. Approaching the target, reported her navigator, Lieutenant Jin. The Zorvani base was built inside a large asteroid, almost invisible to sensors. Almost. Launch the infiltration team, Yu ordered. 6 soldiers in powered armor launched from Yu's ship, using personal thrusters to approach the asteroid. They moved silently through space, invisible to the base's defenses. The Zorvani had good security, but they weren't expecting a human attack. The team, led by Sergeant Tak, cut through the asteroid's outer hull and entered the base's main computer center. The Zorvani inside were tall, pale beings with large eyes. They looked almost human, which made what they had done somehow worse. "Nobody move," Tak announced. "This is a human military operation." The Zorvani intelligence officers raised their hands. They had heard about what happened to those who resisted human forces. It was better to surrender. "We want your records," Tak said. "Everything you gave to the Vekthari. Every file, every communication, every piece of information you provided." The lead Zorvani, a female named Vel 9, shook her head. "That information is classified. We cannot." Tak activated a portable holographic projector. It showed the same recordings that Lieutenant Rim had shown to the Vekthari supply convoy. "New Busan burning, children dying. 3 million people are dead because of information you provided," Tak said. "You can give us your files willingly, or we can take them. Your choice." Vel 9 watched the recordings without speaking. When they were finished, she walked to the main computer terminal and began entering access codes. "I was told the information was for territorial negotiations," she said quietly. "We were not told it would be used to target civilians." "Now you know," Tak said. "Make sure everyone else knows too." Back on Earth, Intelligence Director Han was in a meeting with President Su and her War Council. The information from the Zorvani base was being analyzed, and it revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. 14 species, Han reported. 14 different governments provided some form of aid to the Vekthari attack on New Busan. President Su looked at the list of species names on her screen. Some were major powers in the Galactic Council. Others were smaller worlds that had probably thought they were doing a small favor for a friend. "What kind of aid?" she asked. "Intelligence, weapons, logistics, financing." Some provided safe harbor for Vekthari ships. Others helped with communication networks. The Kelrathi supplied the heavy bombardment weapons that actually destroyed the colony. General Dan leaned forward. "Ma'am, we can't fight 14 species at once. Not effectively." "We don't need to fight them all at once," Sue said. "We just need to make sure they all understand the consequences of their actions." "What are you thinking?" Sue activated a display showing the current deployment of human forces. Ships were spread across the galaxy, striking at Vekthari and Zorvani targets. But there were more ships than anyone outside the military knew about. "We're going to give each of the 14 species a choice," she said. "Publicly condemn the attack on New Busan. Provide full restitution to the survivors. Submit to human oversight of their intelligence services. And turn over anyone involved in the conspiracy." "And if they refuse?" Admiral Kyung asked. "Then they learn what happened to the Vekthari." On the Kelrathi homeworld, Chancellor Rex was in an emergency session with his military commanders. The Kelrathi were warriors, proud and strong, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. "How many ships have we lost?" Rex asked his fleet commander, General Karn. 37 so far. The humans are using tactics we've never seen before. Their ships appear out of nowhere, strike our supply lines, then disappear before we can respond. Rex had supplied weapons to the Vekthari because he thought it would weaken human expansion. The Kelrathi wanted the same territory the humans were claiming. If the Vekthari could drive humans out of the disputed systems, the Kelrathi could move in later. It had seemed like a good plan at the time. "What about their demands?" Rex asked. "They want us to publicly admit our involvement in the New Busan attack. They want war reparations. They want to inspect our weapons factories. And they want us to turn over everyone who was involved in supplying weapons to the Vekthari." Rex growled, a low rumbling sound that came from deep in his throat. The Kelrathi were not used to being dictated to by other species. "If we refuse?" Based on what happened to the Vecthari homeworld, sir, I think they'll blockade our system. Cut off our trade routes, destroy any military ships that try to leave. Rex thought about this. The Kelrathi were warriors, but they were also practical. A war they couldn't win served no purpose. Send a message to the human fleet commander, he said finally. Tell them we're willing to negotiate. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Bay was watching the emergency session with something approaching satisfaction. For weeks, alien representatives had been making speeches about the need for peace and restraint. Now, as more and more species were revealed to have been involved in the New Busan conspiracy, those same representatives were very quiet. Chancellor Thek was reading the latest intelligence reports. It appears, he said, his voice careful and measured, that the attack on the human colony was more coordinated than we initially believed. 14 species, Bay said. 14 members of this council helped murder 3 million human civilians. Ambassador Bay, said the representative from the Althari Union, surely some of these species were merely providing minor assistance. Minor assistance? Bay stood up. The Kelrathi provided the weapons that actually destroyed New Busan. The Zorvani provided detailed intelligence on the colony's defenses. The hegemony provided safe harbor for Vecthari ships. There is no such thing as minor assistance when it comes to genocide. The chamber was quiet. Several species representatives were studying their notes very carefully, avoiding eye contact with Bay. The human government has made its position clear, Bay continued. Every species that aided the attack on New Busan will face consequences. Some have already chosen to negotiate. Others are still deciding. And what happens to those who don't negotiate? Chancellor Thek asked. Bay smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Ask the Vecthari. On a human research station hidden in the Outer Rim, xenopsychologist Tak was preparing a report for Earth Command. She had been studying alien psychology for 15 years, trying to understand how different species thought and behaved. Her report would help military commanders predict how their enemies would respond to human tactics. The key difference, she wrote, is in how humans and other species approach warfare. Most galactic species see war as an extension of politics. They fight until one side gains a sufficient advantage, then they negotiate a settlement. Humans are different. When humans go to war for moral reasons, they don't stop fighting until their moral objectives are achieved. They cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with until justice, as they define it, has been served. This is why the Vecthari's attempt to negotiate territorial concessions failed. Humans are not fighting for territory. They are fighting to enforce a principle. They will not stop until that principle has been validated. Other species need to understand that humans will accept total war, including the complete destruction of their enemies, rather than compromise on issues they consider morally absolute. Tak paused in her writing and thought about the implications of her own research. Humanity's moral absolutism made them incredibly dangerous enemies, but it also made them reliable allies as long as you didn't violate their core principles. President Su stood at the podium in the Galactic Council chambers, looking out at representatives from hundreds of species. Behind her, the entire human battle fleet hung in space around the council station, their weapons powered but not aimed. The message was clear. Humanity was here not to negotiate, but to dictate terms. It had been 6 months since the destruction of New Busan. 6 months of war, blockades, and systematic destruction of those who had broken humanity's sacred law. Now it was time to establish the new order. Honored representatives, Sue began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We are here today because someone broke the Terran doctrine. 3 million innocent humans died because 14 species in this chamber decided that our law didn't apply to them. She activated a holographic display that showed the current status of those 14 species. The Vecthari homeworld was under human occupation. The Kelrathi had surrendered completely. The Zorvani intelligence services had been dismantled. Several smaller species had simply ceased to exist as independent governments. For 50 years, the doctrine protected civilians throughout the galaxy. Your civilians. It prevented the kind of total warfare that had destroyed so many civilizations in the past. And when it was broken, you called for restraint. You called for negotiation. You called for mercy. Sue's voice hardened. Where was your mercy for the children of New Busan? The chamber was completely silent. Even the translator system seemed quieter than usual. Admiral Wan walked forward and placed a data tablet on the speaker's podium. "These are the new terms under which this council will operate," Sue said. The Enhanced Terran Doctrine. The original doctrine had been simple: don't target civilians. The Enhanced Doctrine was much more comprehensive. It established humanity as the enforcer of civilian protection throughout the galaxy. It created human oversight committees for military actions. It required all species to report planned military operations to human authorities. "Some of you are thinking that this is too much," Sue continued, "that humanity is overreaching, that we cannot police the entire galaxy." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "6 months ago, you might have been right, but today I want you to look at your screens." The display changed to show star maps from across the galaxy. Everywhere, human ships were visible. Not just the known fleet, but hundreds of vessels that had been hidden for decades, bases that had been secret, weapons platforms that no one knew existed. "Humanity has been preparing for this day since we first joined the Council," Sue said. "We hoped it would never come, but we were ready." Chancellor Thek, the bird-like Altarian who led the Council, finally found his voice. "President Sue, surely we can find a more balanced approach to these issues." "Balanced?" Sue turned to face him directly. 3 million people are dead, Chancellor. Was that balanced? "The Council deeply regrets." "The Council did nothing," Sue interrupted. "When the Vectari asked for support, some of you gave it to them. When they attacked our civilians, the rest of you offered thoughts and prayers. When we responded, you called us excessive." She walked closer to the Chancellor's seat. "The time for balance is over. The time for regret is over. You had 50 years to enforce our law yourselves. You chose not to. Now we will enforce it for you." Ambassador Bay stepped forward with another data tablet. "These are the specific terms for each species that participated in the New Busan conspiracy," she said. "War reparations, territory transfers, military restrictions, and oversight requirements." The Vectari representative, a broken-looking insect who had replaced War Prime Shex after his execution, spoke quietly. "We accept all terms." One by one, the other conspirator species agreed. They had no choice. Their military forces were destroyed or blockaded. Their economies were in ruins. Their governments existed only because humanity allowed them to exist. But Sue wasn't finished. "The Enhanced Doctrine doesn't just apply to the species that broke the original law," she said. "It applies to everyone." A murmur of concern went through the chamber. From now on, any military action that targets civilians, anywhere in the galaxy, will be met with human intervention. Any species that fails to protect civilians in their territory will face human oversight. Any government that allows genocide or mass killing will be removed and replaced. "President Sue," said the representative from the Centaurian Federation, "you cannot police every conflict in the galaxy." "Watch us," Sue replied. To demonstrate her point, she activated another display. It showed human forces already responding to conflicts across the galaxy. A civil war on Rigel 7 where one faction had started targeting civilian areas. A territorial dispute near the Vega system where refugees were being attacked. A genocide attempt in the outer spiral that had been stopped by human intervention. "We are already doing it," Sue said. "The question is whether you will cooperate with us or whether you will force us to act without your consent." The threat was clear. Humanity didn't need the Council's permission to enforce their law. They were strong enough to do it alone. On the human memorial station that orbited where New Busan used to be, Keeper Yeon was recording the names of the dead. 3 million names carved into walls of black stone. Each name represented a person who had been murdered for the crime of living on the wrong planet. Yeon had been a teacher on New Busan. She had escaped on one of the last evacuation ships, carrying 12 of her students to safety. But she had lost many more. Their names were on these walls. "Today, the galaxy accepted the Enhanced Doctrine," she said into her personal log. "It means that what happened here will never happen again. Anywhere, to anyone." She paused at a section of wall where smaller names were carved. The children who had died. "Some had been her students. I hope you're watching," she whispered. "I hope you know that your deaths meant something." Back in the council chambers, the voting was taking place. The Enhanced Doctrine was being put to a formal vote, though everyone knew the outcome was predetermined. Humanity had the power to enforce it with or without council approval. The vote was unanimous, not because every species agreed with it, but because no species was willing to face the consequences of voting against it. The enhanced Terran doctrine is now galactic law, Chancellor Thek announced. His voice was defeated. The council he had led for 20 years had just voted to give up most of its power to a single species. President Su nodded. Enforcement begins immediately. As the council session ended, representatives from various species approached the human delegation. Some wanted to negotiate specific terms. Others wanted to understand how the new system would work. A few wanted to express private support for humanity's actions, but Su noticed that several species representatives left quickly, without speaking to anyone. Those were the ones that Intelligence Director Han would be watching closely. "Ma'am," Admiral Kyung said quietly, "do you think they'll try to resist the new order?" "Some will," Su replied. "There are always those who think they can find a way around the rules. They'll test us, and when they do..." Su looked out at the human fleet surrounding the station, hundreds of ships all carrying weapons that the galaxy was only now beginning to understand. Weapons designed not just to fight wars, but to end civilizations. When they do, they'll learn what the Vecthari learned, that humanity doesn't bluff when it comes to protecting civilians. 3 months later, the new order was being tested. A species called the Dramani, who lived in the far spiral arm, decided that humanity was too far away to enforce their law. They began what they called population transfers of a neighboring species. In reality, it was genocide. Fleet Commander Ro arrived at the Dramani homeworld with 12 human ships and a simple message: stop the killing or face the consequences. The Dramani ignored the warning. Ro's response was swift and devastating. The Dramani military was destroyed in 6 hours. Their government was removed from power. Human administrators took control of their world, but the civilians were protected. Even Dramani civilians whose government had just committed genocide. The message was clear to everyone watching. Humanity's law applied to everyone, everywhere without exception on Earth. In her private office, President Su read the reports from the Dramani intervention. It had been clean, efficient, and absolutely decisive. The kind of operation that would make other species think twice before testing human resolve. "Ma'am," said her aide, "there are some in the military who are concerned about our new role as galactic police." "What concerns them?" "The scope of it. Policing every conflict, preventing every genocide, protecting every civilian population in the galaxy. It's a massive responsibility." Su was quiet for a moment. She thought about New Busan, about 3 million people who had died because no one was strong enough or willing enough to protect them. "It is a massive responsibility," she agreed, "but it's also a necessary one. For 50 years, we trusted other species to respect civilian life. We trusted them to follow our law voluntarily. They proved that trust was misplaced. So now we enforce it ourselves." "Now we enforce it ourselves," Su confirmed, "until every species in the galaxy understands that civilian lives are sacred, until the idea of targeting innocents becomes unthinkable. And if we make mistakes, if we become too heavy-handed?" Su looked out her window at the city below.